All right, everybody, we're going to talk a little bit in this video about Sprite Zero detection. What is it? How does it relate to the HUD? Why are we using it in the base module? Some of your games don't even need it, so why do we make it sort of the default for this base module? So let's just jump right in and talk a little bit about what Sprite Zero is. Now, excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cold, so if I have to stop and take a coughing break in the middle of talking, I apologize. Sprite Zero, what is it? Well, you see, what happens with the NES is there's a little light that kind of travels down the screen and draws scan line by scan line. It goes from the left to the right and from the top to the bottom. It's always searching for Sprite Zero. When it sees that Sprite Zero is drawn, which is Sprite Zero means the first sprite that is drawn to the screen. When it sees that Sprite Zero is drawn, it checks to see if it's a non-transparent graphic in Sprite Zero overlapping a non-transparent background graphic. If that is true, it flips the bit inside the picture processing unit. It says, okay, there was a Sprite Zero hit. And then you can use that bit to do various things. The most common thing is to split the screen. So if there is a hit between Sprite Zero, if there's a non-transparent pixel overlapping a non-transparent background graphic somewhere on the screen, you can then right there tell it to do something which we're going to use to change the scroll value. So the HUD is going to stay at a scroll value of 0. When it starts drawing, we're going to force the scroll value to be 0, and it's going to draw until it sees, and then bam, it sees a Sprite Zero detection. Then it's going to say, okay, now update the scroll value to however far whatever the value of the scroll is. So as you move to the right, the scroll value is going to increase. That's what's moving sort of your camera. And then, you know, that Sprite Zero is where it actually flips it. So one thing that's cool is if you ever play the original Super Mario Brothers, the Sprite Zero hit actually happens at the coin. That's where it draws a little graphic of the coin behind the background tile of the coin. So it draws a sprite behind the background tile, and it kind of hides it behind it in the shadow of the coin. That's where the Sprite Zero hits. And if you notice, when you're playing Super Mario Brothers, the HUD stays in one place and the rest of the screen continues to scroll. So if you want to know a little bit more about how Sprite Zero works, go ahead and check out Sprite Zero detection in Super Mario Brothers. There's some great articles online. I just want to show you guys how to set it up and how to make sure that you don't get errors and things like that. Most people have been getting errors because, or their games have been crashing or not drawing because they've been starting from scratch and just relying on their own graphics. And that's fine. We want you to use your own graphics. But let me show you why that's breaking things. So I'm going to look at my, let's see, I'm going to look in the pixel editor and I'm going to open up my game objects, and what you're going to see is down here there is a solid tile right here. You see that? That is a non-transparent tile. All this black area here is transparent. If you were to have made a new bitmap for game objects, notice this is now transparent. So if you started drawing your sprite over here, this is non-transparent. Let's talk a little bit about we got to kind of go back and forth here. So let me go up to HUD and boxes. Okay. Before we even start making a Sprite Zero hit, let's keep Sprite Zero detection off, and we're going to check something out. So if I start the game here on a even numbered screen, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. This is 16. This is 32. So it's an even numbered screen. And I go to play the game. You're going to see my HUD at the top of the screen right here, right? But let's say that I want to start on an odd numbered screen. So now I'm going to start on this screen. What happens? I don't see my HUD. Okay, where is it? Let's take a look at the tools. Oh, where is it? I know if I can't remember where it is, but if I can Control P, it'll bring up the picture processing unit. Okay, this is what the game has in its memory right now. You can see this rectangle is where the camera is. So in our module, in this module, it always loads 2 screens worth of data, which will allow us to scroll smoothly, and the scene will be off the screen so we don't see it in our camera where the tiles are actually changing. So what we see is it loaded the HUD, but it always loads the HUD to the first tile set, not the second. That's problematic. What if we're on the second tile set? So this is basically drawing the screen to the left of me, and this is the screen that I'm on, and that's what happened to the HUD. That's why I don't see the HUD when I'm on this even screen. So in order to do this, I would have to set up Sprite Zero, because then what it would do is it would draw this much of this screen, and then it would split the screen, and it would follow the camera wherever the camera is. Now to see this real quick, let me turn on scrolling. I'm going to put my character here. I'm going to make sure that he can walk over here so I'm going to go to screen info, and I'm going to make it scroll to the right, and I'm going to make this screen scroll to the right. Okay, so now if I test it, I'll show you what's going on with the picture processing unit. Okay, so here's my game. Here's my picture processing unit. Right now, I put them back on the left screen so you can see the HUD, and you can see if I start to scroll, you can see what's happening. The camera's moving, and my HUD is staying on that screen. What we want to do is we want to make this always visible, so it's almost as if the camera, this top part of the camera is staying with this, and then it's splitting the screen to only scroll this part. Okay, so that's what I mean by splitting the screen. So if I just go to, let's say, if I go to HUD and boxes, and I look at what my HUD looks like, I can't see it from this view, but that's okay. So I know my HUD's going to look like this. What I wanted to show you is I'm going to draw Sprite Zero to the bottom right corner of the screen right here. And if I test my game, I'm going to see that I've got a little bracket drawn right here. See that? That is, if I look at my graphics, the bottom right. So that's this bottom right. And you can see it's drawing that little bracket. Now I could put something else there if I wanted to. If I wanted this arrow to be there, that's fine. And if I run my game now, I'm going to see that arrow in the bottom right corner. Now I've got that arrow there. Okay, I'm going to put it back to the bracket. So that's how I can change what's in the bottom right. I could also, put different elements. I could put like the coin right here, like in Super Mario Brothers, and use that as my place of contact. What I needed to make sure though is that I do have a graphic in the background. That the first phase of setting up Sprite Zero Hit is making absolute sure that you have a graphic being drawn to the background, which here I do. I do have a graphic being drawn to the background. So if you're starting with a blank game and your own graphics, make sure that you've got a HUD tile set, and make sure that you've got something set to the bottom right corner here, or at least somewhere where you want the Sprite Zero to split the screen. So let's do this. So, okay. But right now, if I just go to Sprite Zero and I just leave everything blank, look where it's drawing my sprite. Let's move it over a little bit. And move it down a little bit. Right now what's going to happen is my game is going to crash out because I'm using Sprite Zero Hit. It's looking for where Sprite Zero is overlapping a background, and guess what? It never does. So, excuse me, if I test the game right now, it's never going to actually find that Sprite Zero Hit, and this is what's happening with some of you guys. With some of you guys, you don't see your player, and you're like, what's happening? Sprite Zero Hit never got past that Sprite Zero Hit, and so you're kind of stuck in an infinite loop. And right now, I also am telling it. What do you notice? It's the bunny ears there in the top corner. Why is it the bunny ears? If I go to my pixel editor and I open up my game objects, it's drawing this right here. It's drawing this first sprite because if I look at what index I'm drawing sprite index 0. So check this out. If I go to my pixel editor. Let's say I wanted to draw the top corner of this sword. Let's make it even easier. I want to draw this ear instead of this one facing up. I'm going to add this one. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I go up there and I change, come here. I change this to 7. It's going to be like that diagonal facing ear. And it's still only going to draw that one sprite, and we're still not going to have the game actually rendering. So you can see it's drawing that floopy ear right there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to use this right here. Now, you don't have to. You can put a sprite you can actually use that floppy ear if you want. You can use any graphic that's a non-transparent graphic. You can make it just a single pixel somewhere. I'm going to use this, which is Sprite 127, okay? If I counted 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would get to 127 if I counted all the way. So if I go to HUD and boxes and I make my index 127, now it's going to draw that full square. Whoops. Make sure that I click off of there. Okay. There. Now it's drawing that full square, and that's what I want. Now, the reason that I'm choosing a full square is because I really want to show you what's going to happen. One of the coolest things that you're going to be able to do is you could make a graphic that lines right up with wherever you want the Sprite Zero hit to be. So like I could make that thing right there. Like I could make that exact graphic on that position 127 and draw it perfectly overlapping, and then I wouldn't even see it in my game. We'll do that at the end. All right. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. So now we got to move this around so that we see the Sprite Zero hit. If I start increasing my X, you can see it start moving over. I know that if I go to about 246 or so, it's going to draw it over here. And if I draw it downward at about, 27, 28 or so, now it's absolutely going to hit it. Like I'm definitely going to hit that curled graphic right there. And now there is going to be a Sprite Zero hit. So you'll see what's going to happen. Now my player will draw. There we go. And you can see I made it so it's visible. I've by default put Sprite Zero behind the background tiles. That's a bit that you can flip when you're drawing the sprite. So you can see it is right there. There's a top left corner. I can actually see where it is. And where it saw a connection for the first time, that's where the Sprite Zero hit is actually happening. And that's where it's splitting the screen. So what I can now do is if I move, actually let me pull up the picture processing unit so you can see. As I move, it's going to disregard the camera for all the way until it sees the Sprite Zero. And even though the camera's moving, it's still showing me this part of the screen before the Sprite Zero hit. So that's what Sprite Zero is for. That's why we're doing it. So let's take it to a little bit more advanced stuff here. I want to actually make a graphic, and this is going to take a couple of attempts to get right, I'm sure. But let's completely hide it so we don't see that blue line there. If I go to my pixel editor and I'm going to replace this, I'm going to add a tab, and in image 2, I'm going to open up my, HUD tiles, and I'm going to get that same graphic right there. So I'm going to actually get this guy, copy it. And I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to paste it here. So you know what that is? That's 127, 126, 125, 124, 123, 122. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go to HUD and boxes, and I'm going to make this 122. And I'm just going to move it out of the way so that we can absolutely see that it's drawing it. And now my player is going to disappear again because it's not going to see a Sprite Zero hit. Let's do like 210 or something. Okay, so let's check that out. And you can see there it is right there. Now it's not reading the hit. We want to place this right there in the corner. Okay, so I'm going to just move this over. Move this down. And that should be it. I believe it should be that. 248 by 24. Now, I might have that off by up a couple pixels. Let's see. Nope, I got it. So we have successfully now hid that behind the HUD. Now, maybe you don't want that exact shape, but you should now understand how you can get your Sprite Zero to sort of match up exactly with whatever graphic you decide to choose for your HUD. The important thing to note, though, if you cannot make Sprite Zero hit work with a transparent graphic there, you need to have an opaque graphic and an opaque sprite overlapping each other. That's how it knows that there was a Sprite Zero hit. Okay, just for kicks, let's do this. Let's make a HUD asset, and we'll just make it 1 by 1, and we'll make it this crystal ball. And I'm going to make this an asset, choose that asset, and I'm going to place it sorry about that. I'm going to place it like here. Now, this is going to take some trial and error here, so bear with me. I'm going to place it like right here. Okay, so I'm going to try and line up my Sprite Zero hit with that instead. And we're going to see some weird stuff that happens. So, now one thing that I want to do different eventually is be able to show the overlay here, but right now it doesn't. So I'm just going to guess real quick. I'm going to guess it was right in this area, right? That's about right. All right, something like that. And we'll just move it around until we get it. Okay. So now, okay, I got to move it to the left a little bit. Something like that. And now, awesome. So my Sprite Zero is behind there. I don't see it because this is in the foreground. And this, where it first sees that Sprite Zero hit, that's where it's going to split the screen. So this is going to do something really kind of weird. Let's take a look and watch what happens if I start to scroll. You could see it split it in a weird spot, right? It didn't split it at the edge like I thought it would. So, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, and I could show you the code. I know we don't like to look at code right now, but let's take a look at just a little bit. I just want to show you what happens so you can understand. Let's take a look at basic. Let's take a look at main. Okay, so I don't want you to actually do anything. I just want you to see this, what's actually happening with Sprite Zero. Let's go up here, sorry. Right here. So this is where the Sprite Zero stuff is happening. And what's happening is, this is how long it actually waits after it sees a Sprite Zero hit in order to start splitting the screen, okay? So it's waiting a bunch of computer cycles. It's waiting a bunch of game cycles. So whatever this number is, if it's 0, it's actually waiting 256 cycles. If it's 1, it's just waiting 1 cycle. If it's 2, it's waiting 2 cycles. If it's 3, it's waiting 3 cycles, all the way up to 255. Where do you set this? That's what this number is right here. So as I set this, watch what happens if I only set the H blank wait time to 1, which means it's going to get here and it's going to split the screen like right here. So watch what happens right now. So now as I start to move, you can see what's happening right there. That's not exactly the effect I was going for. And you can see this, it's got this weird edging thing going on over here. Okay, so let's start, messing with that number and take a look at some of the things that happen. First of all, let's take a look at what happens. I'll make it like a big number, like 200. All right, so let's test this out. And I want you to watch where the screen is splitting when I have it at a number like 200. So we'll move over, and you can see the screen is splitting underneath of that crystal ball. Whereas if I make it a number like 8, it's going to actually split on the crystal ball. So basically what's happening there is this is how many cycles to wait for that scan line to finish drawing. So if I put this back up again. So basically what's happening is I have the Sprite Zero hit happening right in the middle of the screen right here, right? And what I want is I want the scan line to finish drawing and get all the way over to here before it splits the screen. Otherwise, I'm going to have that effect where part of the crystal ball started to shift away or whatever. So what I could do is I could play with this number, and I could try the best I can to sort of get it to the right number so that I don't have that effect where it sort of shears the thing. Oops, it sort of shears the thing that I'm trying to use as the separating point. Let's see if I can. Nope, that's still pretty bad. Let's try making it like 32. Okay, and a lot of this is one of the most annoying parts about this process is trying to figure out this number right here in a way that doesn't shear it like that, doesn't give you these weird jaggies over here. But that's how you can do it. My strongest recommendation is put a bottom corner graphic in there, and then you don't really have to worry about this because it'll split it pretty dependably right there. If you just put the wait time at 1, it's touching right at the edge, so that's where it's going to split, and it'll be like just a couple of cycles, and that's what I'd recommend. You can try and do something like this, and this is how you can sort of adjust that number to try and get it perfectly matched up, so that way the scan line happens right below wherever you want the screen to split. But you'll even notice, like on major commercial games, you'll see those little jaggy lines between the HUD and the game. There are even commercial games that couldn't get around that. So the last thing that I need you to understand is that you cannot do this with a Sprite Zero hit set. So if I make this my playable area and I try and make this my HUD area, even if I put my graphic way down here, even if I make this clip the top corner of this. So let's say it'd be 230 maybe. Let's see. Nope, 200 or so. Let's see. And 230, 246. Okay. Now that absolutely will hit the top corner. But chances are, and I'm not 100% sure, wacky things are going to happen. Let's see. I should make that Sprite 127 too. So it might not be hitting, but let's make sure that it's hitting by making this 127. And I bet you it'll still do some weird things right now. We might get lucky. Yeah, did you see? Like, it's what is it doing? It's doing all kinds of weird things. There's a weird, almost invisible thing happening. Okay, here's why that's happening. All the Sprite Zero check is happening during what's called the NMI. It's the V blank. The light bar is going all the way down to the bottom of the screen, and then it's going back up to the top of the screen, and that's sort of when a lot of this stuff is happening. And that is a very small window of time. All right. So during that very small window of time, it doesn't have the logic time to trace all the way down the screen until that happens and then start running the rest of the logic for that interrupt. It just doesn't have the time, which is why most scrolling games for the NES had their HUD at the top. And so with this mapper, you're going to have your HUD at the top too if you want to have a Sprite Zero hit and a scrolling game. And the reason that some games didn't is they used a different mapper type that could actually count the scan lines, and that's how they were able to put a HUD at the bottom. But we're not going to get into that at all. We just made a simple Sprite Zero hit solution for those of you who did want to start your scrolling games. So hopefully that gives you some good understanding of how to use Sprite Zero, what might be wrong if all of a sudden your sprites aren't drawing anymore, etc., and how you can make the most out of Sprite Zero for the graphics in your game. And for those of you who don't want scrolling at all, and you're sure of that, and you want a module that doesn't have scrolling, we're going to take a look at how to add new cores in one of the next videos, and that's going to solve this problem of having to deal with Sprite Zero for those of you who don't want to. So thanks for checking this out, and see you in the next video.